What if the thought in your head isn't even yours? It didn't emerge. It was inserted, quietly, precisely, without your permission, from a parent, a teacher, a screen, a trend. You absorbed it, repeated it, and called it truth. But you never questioned its origin. That's not awareness, that's programming. You believe you're making choices. But how many of those choices were framed before you even noticed? Before you even asked who benefits? Noise isn't just distraction, it's domination. Every reaction you give, every opinion you absorb, every idea you echo. It all feeds the architecture that controls you. And the worst part, it feels normal. Because when the system installs enough noise, silence becomes the enemy. But not today. Today you break the loop. You turn down the volume. You reclaim the signal. This isn't about mindfulness. This is about mental sovereignty. And it starts now. They didn't need to silence you. They only needed to flood you. Flood your mind with instructions, with standards, with narratives so loud you forgot what your own voice sounded like. From the moment you could think, they didn't nurture that ability. They shaped it. They told you what was reasonable, what was normal, what success should look like, what failure should feel like. They gave you the words, they gave you the angles, and they gave you permission to think only within the walls they built. You thought you were developing self-awareness, but you were just updating their system. You don't even need to be forced, just exposed long enough to the same frame. Think of how many people still measure their worth by grades, job titles, or how early they wake up. Not because it fulfills them, but because they were told that's what success is supposed to look like. Because every structure needs compliance, not from rebellion, but from agreement. This is how they control the mind, not through fear, but through familiarity. When something is repeated enough, it becomes invisible. When everyone believes it, it becomes unchallengeable. So you follow without questioning. You compare without realizing. You adjust your energy to match environments that drain you, because you think that's what adapting means. But what if adaptation was the virus? What if your flexibility was their weapon? They don't need to break your will. Just keep you predictable and responsive, because when you reflect what they expect, you stop generating what you are. You become an echo, not a signal. And the louder the world gets, the less space you have to build yourself from within. This is mental invasion, but it looks like culture, it looks like values, it looks like being a good person. You were trained to fit in, but never to question the mold. That ends here, because once you understand the structure, you begin to see the loop. And the next move is to break it from the inside. They didn't just shape your thoughts. They installed loops, patterns that repeat, reactions that feel automatic, beliefs that sound like your voice, but aren't. That's the hidden mechanism. Repetition breeds ownership. The more you hear something, the more it feels like it belongs to you. Not because you agree, but because you're familiar. They don't need to argue with you. They just need to echo around you until your defenses dissolve. Every headline, every scroll, every trending phrase is a data packet wrapped in noise, waiting for your nervous system to imprint it. This is psychic contamination. You mistake it for intuition, but it's programming. Because intuition arises in silence. Contamination thrives in clutter. The world isn't just loud, it's intentional. Because when your mind is filled with reactive loops, you don't question the source. You just follow the rhythm. And here's the trap. Once your nervous system associates that rhythm with safety, it starts craving it, even when it's toxic. You begin to fear stillness, you mistake discomfort for danger, and you seek stimulation. Just to feel normal again, but that normal is manufactured. It was built to keep you inside the loop. Scroll, react, compare, scroll, react, obey. Every loop you run weakens the original signal. Your inner voice becomes buried under borrowed noise. That's why silence feels awkward. That's why solitude feels scary, because those are the places where the loop dies, and the system depends on your addiction to motion, to feedback, to the next opinion, the next headline, the next surge of relevance. It's not that you lost yourself, it's that your mind became too loud to hear yourself anymore. But if loops can be installed, they can also be dismantled. And the first step is to cut the feed, not forever. Just long enough to remember what unprogrammed stillness feels like. The system thrives on your reaction. It needs your input to stay relevant. Every comment, every argument, every triggered response is data it collects to refine the next loop. So here's the move. You stop reacting. You go silent. You cut the signal, not as escape, but as extraction. Silence is not retreat. It's a recalibration. Because when you stop feeding the system, it loses grip, not just on your time, but on your identity. Every time you disconnect, you reclaim a portion of yourself that was on lease. You begin to feel what real sovereignty sounds like. No push, no pull, just signal. Here's the truth they never told you. Stillness isn't weakness, it's resistance. Most people fear it because they've been conditioned to equate activity with relevance. But activity isn't power, presence is. And presence requires space. That's why they fill your space with noise. Notifications, opinions, content, controversy. Because if your space stays full, you never pause long enough to question the frame. You never see who's benefiting from your constant movement. So you stay in motion, and they stay in control. But the moment you go still, the loop can't find you. It searches for a reaction, for a pattern, for a rhythm to hijack. But when none comes, it breaks. This is strategic withdrawal. Not detachment, not indifference. Just a conscious decision to unplug, long enough to let the dust settle, so you can see clearly. Think originally, and act with precision instead of impulse. Stillness is not the absence of action, it's the sharpening of it. Because in silence, you don't just hear your own voice, you hear which voices were never yours to begin with. This isn't about isolation, it's about filtration. Who gets in, what stays out, what thoughts are yours to keep, and which ones were simply smuggled in through the noise. You won't find yourself in the algorithm, you'll find yourself in the gaps between it. And the more you master withdrawal, the less predictable you become. Because now, they can't read you, they can't provoke you, they can't track your next move. And in the game of mental warfare, that is the highest form of control. Once you stop reacting, something unexpected happens. They start adjusting to you, because now you've disrupted the pattern. And in a world addicted to predictability, disruption is dominance. The system depends on reading your behavior. It needs you to be trackable, controllable, influenceable. But silence makes you unreadable. Stillness makes you untouchable. And that's when the power shifts. You're no longer inside their frame. You've become the one defining it. Ever been in a room where someone said less, but everyone kept checking their reaction? That's frame control. Not by words, but by presence. This is reverse infiltration. You don't enter their system. You make them recalibrate to yours. The game doesn't begin when you speak. It begins when you withhold. Because the less you reveal, the more they speculate. The more they speculate, the more they project, and the more they project, the less control they have over what's actually happening. You don't have to convince them. You don't have to correct them. You just have to hold your frame until their version of reality crumbles against it. Here's the truth they fear. Reality isn't what's true. It's what's framed. Whoever holds the frame holds the outcome. So don't waste energy inside someone else's logic. Don't debate inside their assumptions. Instead, redefine the context. Shift the focus. Ask the question they never considered, not to win the argument, but to make the argument irrelevant. You aren't here to fit into conversations. You're here to redirect them. Because when you control the frame, you don't chase power. You anchor it. You don't manipulate people. You influence perception. You don't dominate with force. You dissolve resistance before it even begins. That's the power of framing. And once you hold it, you never need to raise your voice again. This is where the shift happens, from defense to design. You're no longer avoiding their influence. You're building something they can't enter. A sovereign mind isn't loud. It doesn't need validation. It doesn't ask permission to exist. It selects thoughts with precision, not based on trend, but on alignment. Most people think out loud because they're hoping someone will approve it. But sovereignty begins when your thinking no longer depends on agreement. No more rehearsing what others might think. No more translating your truth into their language. No more watering down clarity just to be digestible. You are no longer available for mental negotiation. Your thoughts are not suggestions, they are declarations. This is the mind that doesn't flinch under pressure. It doesn't chase understanding. It doesn't fear silence, because silence, for the sovereign, isn't empty. It's full of decisions, decisions no one else gets to edit. And the more you embody that, the more others feel it, without you needing to say a word. You start moving differently, thinking strategically, filtering without apology. You don't explain your distance. You don't justify your focus. You don't soften your clarity just to make others comfortable. Not because you're cold, but because you've chosen alignment over approval. And the world feels that. You become unreadable, unshakable, and unreactive, not out of ego, but because you've stripped away the noise and returned to center. Now when thoughts enter, you ask, does this match my code? Does this thought serve my frame or fracture it? Did I choose this or did I absorb it? That single question, did I choose this thought, becomes your firewall, and most won't understand it. They'll think you've changed, that you've pulled away, that you've become distant. But in truth, you've simply become sovereign. And sovereignty has a different frequency. It doesn't beg to be heard. It doesn't fight to be liked. It simply exists, anchored, intentional, and untouched. And when the mind becomes untouchable, no system can overwrite it again. From this point forward, you don't let thoughts in by default. You filter them, you interrogate them, you let them prove their purpose. Because now you understand, not every thought deserves to stay. Not every idea deserves your attention. Not every emotion is yours to carry. This is fortress mode. a mental state where your inner world is sealed, not by walls of fear, but by architecture of clarity. You no longer absorb noise to feel connected. You no longer explain your silence to feel understood. You no longer react to prove you're alive. Stillness becomes your signature. Distance becomes your signal. And silence becomes your weapon. Because when you stop broadcasting, they stop predicting. And when they can't predict you, they can't control you. This is the highest power, not in domination of others, but in full command of yourself. So the next time a thought arises, ask, did I choose this? Or was it planted? And if it doesn't serve the frame, delete it. The fortress has no room for noise. It only houses what strengthens the core, what sharpens the vision, what protects the code. And now that you've reclaimed your code, you don't explain it. You execute it. The world doesn't need your justification. It will adjust to your absence. And when it finally hears your voice, it won't sound like the rest. It will sound like sovereignty. No approval, no permission, no compromise, only signal, only presence, only truth. And that is how you become untouchable. Start with a 24-hour silence window. No scroll, no reply. Just observe what thoughts try to hijack your mind.